Trump expands the travel ban list to 39 countries. FBI widens net in hunt for Brown University shooter. Salam Malaysia Madani, this is World Today. I'm Shuhaida Arifin. US President Donald Trump on Tuesday signed a proclamation expanding the list of countries with full or partial travel restrictions to 39, increasing from the previous list of 19 countries, according to the White House. The list of the countries is subject to a full travel ban, prohibits citizens from an additional 7 countries, including Syria, from entering the US. The White House said that Trump signed a proclamation expanding entry restrictions on nationals from countries with demonstrated, persistent and severe deficiencies in screening, vetting and information sharing to protect the nation from security threats. The move bans citizens from Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, South Sudan, Syria and those holding Palestinian Authority-issued travel documents. The action also imposes a full ban on Laos and Sierra Leone, which had previously only been subjected to partial restrictions. The White House said the expanded ban goes into effect on 1st January. Trump also added partial restrictions and entry limitations on an additional 15 countries, including Nigeria. The expansion of the countries subject to entry restriction marks a further escalation of immigration measures taken since the shooting of 2 National Guard members by an Afghan national in Washington, D.C. last month. FBI experts combed through the vicinity of a weekend mass shooting that killed 2 students at the elite Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, as the hunt for the gunman dragged into a 4th day. The shooting happened on Saturday when a man with a rifle burst into a campus building where exams were underway and opened fire before fleeing. Providence officials screened a new video timeline at a briefing which appeared to show the person of interest walking through residential areas in the town.
When it happened on Saturday night, obviously it was chaos, and there was a witness that stated that he might have been in his 30s. At this point, we're still just looking at the picture. We haven't identified ages or anything to that point. And as far as whether he's a problem student or anything, we don't have any of those answers, no.
Perez renewed his appeal for members of the public with homes and vehicles equipped with cameras to supply footage to the police. He added 200 actionable tips had been received by investigators. Authorities initially detained a man in connection with the shooting, but they later released him, saying he was unconnected. 6 members of Canada's parliament travelling from Jordan were denied entry to the occupied West Bank by Israeli authorities, who accused the delegation of being sponsored by a terror entity. The lawmakers were on a trip sponsored by a charity group called Canadian Muslim Vote. Lawmakers Jenny Kwan said one member of parliament, Ikra Khalid, of Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party, was pushed multiple times by an Israeli border officer. Kwan said the delegation gave Israeli authorities prior warning about their trip, which included a range of planned meetings with aid groups and society leaders. Electronic travel authorization to enter the West Bank were initially approved, but upon arrival at the Allenby Bridge crossing, the entire delegation was denied entry to the West Bank. Kwan said before leaving Canada, she considered the prospect that the group would encounter difficulties, but of Carney's decision to recognize Palestinian statehood in September. She noted that the delegation had returned to Jordan's capital, Amman. Canada's Foreign Minister Anita Anait said Ottawa has expressed Canada's objections regarding the mistreatment of the Canadians.
Guna mentol jimat tenaga untuk lebih jimat.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a blockade of sanctioned oil vessels heading to and leaving Venezuela, sharply escalating his pressure campaign against Caracas while issuing new demands for the country's crude. The U.S. has been for months building a major military deployment in the Caribbean with the stated goal of combating drug trafficking in Latin America. After weeks of military jet flybys off the Venezuelan coast and strikes on alleged drug trafficking boats, the Trump administration heightened its campaign last week by seizing an oil tanker leaving the South American nation. It subsequently announced sanctions on several other vessels. On his Truth Social platform, Trump said he is ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela. He said the large U.S. naval armada amassed in the Caribbean will only get bigger until Venezuela returns to the U.S. all of the stolen oil, land and other assets. The U.S. president did not specify what oil or land he was referring to, but Venezuela in the 1970s nationalized its oil industry. UN Rights Chief Volker Turk has urged Venezuela to free all activists arbitrarily detained by the authorities for their civic engagement. Turk told the Human Rights Council that since he last updated the top UN rights body in June, the situation in Venezuela has not improved. He said that many people are being driven out of the country by intimidation and persecution.
The crackdown on civic space has intensified, suffocating people's freedoms. Public life is becoming further militarized, increasing the risk of violence in a society already grappling with high levels of crime.
Turk also said that the Venezuelan authorities had stepped up reprisals against family members of those perceived to be voicing dissent both within the country and abroad. The protest that followed the presidential election, when President Nicolas Maduro claimed a third term, despite accusations of fraud from the opposition and in numerous countries, resulted in 28 deaths and around 2,400 arrests. Nearly 2,000 people have been released since then. The M23 armed group said it will withdraw from the key city of Uvira in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo at the request of Washington, which vowed action over the clear violation of U.S. brokered peace accord. The group seized the strategic city near the border with Burundi last Wednesday, days after the Congolese and Rwandan governments signed the peace deals in Washington. Its capture of Uvira allowed it to control the land of border with Burundi and cut Congo off from military support from its neighbor. Leader of the M23's political branch, Corneille Nangaa, announced that the group would unilaterally withdraw its forces from Uvira as requested by the U.S. mediators. The group called for adequate measures to be put in place to manage the city, including demilitarization, protecting its population and infrastructure, and monitoring the ceasefire with a neutral force. The group also called for implementation of a framework ceasefire deal that was reached in a parallel peace process negotiated in the Qatari capital Doha, which was agreed in November but never respected on the ground. On a related note, at least 85,000 refugees have crossed into Burundi after M23's latest advance in the eastern Congo. Burundian officials warned of dire overcrowding and catastrophic conditions. Approximately 25,000 refugees are currently registered in Gatumba and nearly 40,000 in Buganda. The Economic Community of Central African States Commission said the figures continue to rise daily. It added the vast majority of the refugees are women and children living in extreme precariousness and entirely deprived of basic means of subsistence. They face acute shortages of food, shelter, sanitization, facilities, safe drinking water, and basic health services. The refugees are compounded by overcrowding, leading to fears of diseases. United Nations has reported that more than 200,000 people have been displaced as a result of the offensive on Uvira. The latest violence follows the capture early this year of the two other major eastern cities, Goma and Bukavu, which also caused mass displacement. Israeli strikes on Lebanon killed at least 2 people, one of them near Beirut. Despite a November 2024 ceasefire that was supposed to end more than a year of hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah, Israel has kept up strikes on Lebanon. Lebanon's health ministry said an Israeli enemy strike on a vehicle on the Jadra-Siblin road in the Shof district killed 1 person and wounded 5 others. The area is around 30 kilometers south of the capital. Earlier, the ministry said 1 person was killed in an Israeli strike on a vehicle in Odeiseh near the border with Israel. Around 340 people have been killed by Israeli attacks on Lebanon since the ceasefire agreement went into force. The latest attacks comes as a ceasefire monitoring committee, which includes France and the US, is set to meet later this week. Coming up next, EU drops 2035 combustion engine ban. The European Commission has unveiled a plan to drop the EU's effective ban on new combustion 2035 after pressure from the region's auto sector, marking the bloc's biggest retreat from its green policies in recent years.
La liste des technologies reste encore L'objectif reste le même. Les flexibilités sont en réalité des flexibilités qui sont pragmatiques au vu de l'adhésion des consommateurs, de la difficulté également des constructeurs à proposer sur le marché du 100% électrique pour 2035. Et donc la Commission européenne a choisi en réalité un axe qui est à la fois pragmatique mais qui garde ses objectifs et ses ambitions climatiques.
The move, which still needs approval from EU governments and European Parliament, would allow continued sales of some non-electric vehicles. Under the proposal, EU targets would shift to a 90% cut in carbon dioxide emissions from 2021 levels, instead of current rules that all new cars from 2035 have zero emissions. Automakers would need to offset the remaining emissions by using lower carbon steel made in the EU and synthetic e-fuels or non-food biofuels such as agricultural waste and used cooking oil. The US has threatened countermeasures against the EU over the bloc's efforts to tax American firms, pointing to major European companies as potential targets. However, the European Union swiftly vowed to keep enforcing its tax regulations without discrimination. The U.S. Trade Representative's Office criticized the EU and certain member states for their continuing cause of lawsuits, taxes, fines and directives against American service providers. It warned that if the bloc and its members pressed on the moves deemed to deter the competitiveness of U.S. companies, Washington will have no choice but to begin using every tool at its disposal to counter the unreasonable measures. The office also signaled that key European businesses would be targeted in response, listing Accenture, DHL, Siemens and Spotify among others. The European Commission, however, responded that its rules apply equally and fairly to all companies operating in the EU. It noted that the bloc will continue to enforce the rules fairly and without discrimination. On another note, the White House has suspended implementation of a tech cooperation deal with Britain that was signed during U.S. President Donald Trump's state visit to the UK in September. The White House said the UK must make substantial progress on two trade talks in order to resume a cooperation deal that was to build partnership in artificial intelligence, quantum computing and nuclear energy. The US and UK are trying to implement the economic prosperity deal agreed in May and one of the first international agreements signed after Trump threatened the world with punishing tariffs on goods entering the US. US-UK technology prosperity deal agreed in September was a non-binding agreement to sit alongside the broader economic prosperity deal. It was designed to align the two countries on tech innovation while spurring mostly private sector investment. According to the Financial Times, US officials have become increasingly frustrated with Britain's lack of willingness to address non-tariff barriers, including rules governing food and industrial goods. French lawmakers have adopted a social security budget, which includes the suspension of an unpopular pension reform, as Prime Minister Setia races to finalise the 2026 spending plan by year-end. The National Assembly approved the measure by 247 votes to 232, the first of two budget bills needed to pass before 31st December deadline. The version of the bill lawmakers approved includes the suspension of a 2023 reform to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. The vote marks the first budget adopted without using Article 49.3 of the Constitution since 2022. Lawmakers now face mounting pressure to pass a draft state budget bill, with negotiations set to begin on Friday. France, the Eurozone's second largest economy, is under pressure to rein in its deficit and soaring debt, but efforts have been hampered by a political deadlock. Le Cornu, the country's third prime minister in a little over a year, has promised to get a budget through parliament after the legislature ousted his two predecessors over cost-cutting measures. China will impose anti-dumping duties on European Union pork imports for 5 years, but at a lower rate than temporary levies in places in September. The duties will range from 4.9% to 19.8%, down from temporary levies of 15.6% to 62.4%. The new measure will be applied from today. The levies come after a probe launched by China last year, which concluded that European pork imports were being dumped and the domestic industry suffered substantial damages as a result. The Commerce Ministry said at present, the domestic industry is facing difficulties and there are strong calls for protection. It added that the investigation's conclusions were objective, fair and impartial. Spain's Agriculture Ministry said Spanish exporters face an average duty of 9.8%, below an overall average of 19%. It said the measures are therefore acceptable for Spain, with the impact minimized. China, the world's leading consumer of pork, imported 4.3 billion yuan in pork products from Spain alone last year.
Bersihkan penapis penghawa dingin dan tetapkan 24 darjah Celsius untuk lebih jimat.
At least 13 people were reported killed and 70 injured in a vehicle pile-up on an expressway in the northern Indian state of Uttar Pradesh. Many victims were charred to death in the accident involving 7 buses and 3 cars on the Yamuna Expressway between Delhi and Agra. A police official said the collision occurred in the Mathura district due to low visibility caused by dense winter fog. Emergency responders, including fire services and police, rushed to the scene after locals and witnesses attempted to rescue those trapped in burning vehicles. Videos of the accident posted on social media showed several vehicles engulfed in flames. Dozens of injured people were being treated for burns at various hospitals. Mathura District Magistrate Chandra Prakash Singh announced that families of the victims will receive a payment of 200,000 rupees. The second of two doctors who supplied Friends star Matthew Perry with a ketamine in the months before he fatally overdosed was sentenced to home confinement by a California court on Tuesday. Mark Chavez, age 55, admitted to one count of conspiracy to supply the drug, which the actor was buying for up to $2,000 a vial in the weeks before his 2023 death in the hot tub of his Los Angeles home. Chavez, who ran a ketamine infusion clinic near San Diego, was ordered to be confined at home for 8 months. He must also perform 300 hours of community service. The disgraced medic wrote a fraudulent prescription to obtain ketamine, an anesthetic that is also used in depression therapy, but can be misused as a party drug, that he then supplied to fellow doctor Salvador Plasencia. Plasencia was jailed this month for 2.5 years. Both men have surrendered their medical licenses. 3 other people who have also admitted their part in supplying drugs to the actor will be sentenced over the coming months. A criminal investigation was launched soon after an autopsy discovered Perry had a high level of ketamine in his system. Coming up in sports, Malaysia on track to achieve 200 medal target. Stay with us.
Sukan Si Thailand 2025. Segala aksi, pencapaian, detik-detik kemenangan.
Tanduk ganda di suria.
Dan kemas kini semasa, kutipan pingat keseluruhan terus dibawakan untuk anda sepanjang 10 hingga 19 Disember dalam Laporan Harian Pagi, 10 pagi, Laporan Harian Petang, 3 petang, Laporan Harian Malam, 8 malam, serta Sorotan Harian 11.30 minit malam di saluran OK dan Sukan RTM.
Malaysia masih lagi mengawal permainan. Kandas, naik ke belakang, blocking, jaringan penyaman daripada Malaysia.
Juga boleh disaksikan secara penstreaman langsung di RTM Click.
The Malaysian contingent appears to be on the right track to achieve the target of 200 medals set for the 2025 Thailand SEA Games. With about 4 days remaining before the biennial sports event draws its curtain down at the Raja Mangkala National Stadium this Saturday, Malaysia has already accumulated 151 medals, comprising 30 gold, 31 silver and 90 bronze, placing in its 5th position. Malaysia added 4 gold medals yesterday, starting with Megan Min Ding from equestrian. Megan and her horse Gaudi Vita emerged victorious, scoring 76.252 points in the event, which featured 8 competitors. The score is a new SEA Games record. Experienced shooter Ong Chi Kang made history by ending Malaysia's 32-year drought for a gold medal in a men's individual trap event after gunning down 39 points in a 6-participant final, thus bringing home the country's first gold in the event since Heng Chai Yi achieved the same feat in 1993 edition in Singapore. National kegglers Muhammad Rafiq Ismail and Muhammad Shazirul Shamsuddin put on an excellent performance to win the men's doubles event. Muhammad Rafiq recorded a score of 203, while Muhammad Shazirul contributed 266 points for a total of 470. Discussed champion Muhammad Irfan Shamsuddin stole the spotlight by defending his gold medal since 2013 edition in Myanmar, whilst breaking the game's record of the 59.50 meters that stood for 26 years, set by Wong Tak Kim of Singapore in the 1999 edition in Brunei. In another development, the national men's hockey squad maintained their undefeated record in the round-robin league after defeating Thailand 6-2 in their final match at the National Sports University in Chonburi yesterday. The victory allows the Sajid Singh's team to finish the round-robin league in the top positions and will face a fourth-place Singapore in the semi-finals on Thursday.
The competition format is 1 play 4, 2 play 3, which we know will end up number 1. We will play the 4 of the team. So we are just hopefully semi-final and finals. That's where we will find it very important game. Semi-final kita akan lawan Singapore. So I think earlier we beat them 6-0. Our city, we are here just to move the ball around and we just let everybody a good chance to play. And we just create a lot of opportunity to score and we need to take the chances.
The other semi-final will see Thailand take on Indonesia. FIFA introduced on Tuesday a small number of $60 supported entry tier tickets, aiming to make next year's World Cup more affordable for fans of qualified teams. Football's governing body said that the discounted tickets would cover all 104 matches of the tournament, including the final. The cheaper tickets will make up 10% of participating members' associations' PMA's allocations. The PMAs, which represent competing national teams and manage dedicated fan ticket programs, will handle the ticket allocation process. FIFA, in a statement, said that in total, half of each PMA's ticket allocation will fall within the most affordable categories, namely 40% under the supporter value tier and 10% under the new supporter entry tier. The remaining allocation will be split evenly between the supporters' standard tier and the supporter premier tier. Fans who apply through PMA ticketing programs and whose teams fail to progress to the knockout stage will have administrative fees waived or for refund requested. The announcement comes amid growing scrutiny of ticket pricing ahead of the 2026 tournament set to take place from 11th June to 19th July across Canada, Mexico and the United States. Paris Saint-Germain are looking to add to a historic calendar year by lifting the Intercontinental Cup to close out 2025. The treble winners take on Copa Libertadores and Brazilian Serie A champion Flamengo in Wednesday's final, with head coach Luis Enrique aiming to make more of a mark. PSG became only the second French club and the first in over 3 decades to be crowned European champions when they defeated Inter Milan in last season's Champions League final. Then fell short to Chelsea in the final of the summer's revamped Club World Cup. But Wednesday's match offers the Parisian a lifeline in their quest to become the only French team to lift an intercontinental title. Now in its second year, the Intercontinental Cup replaced the Club World Cup in the football calendar and pits the champion of the FIFA Sixth Confederation against each other after the latter competition was expanded to a 32-team tournament to be held every 4 years. And that's it from us this afternoon. In our top story, Trump expands the travel ban list to 39 countries. Malaysia Tonight comes on at 8:30 p.m. this evening on TV1 and MyTV's Berita RTM news channel. Thank you for watching.